Welcome to our next lecture on Derek Parfit's conception of survival as mattering and identity not mattering. So let's get into it. We begin with what's called a fission case, which we'll look at as well in the lecture on Nagel and brain bisection. But it's another thought experiment, kind of like a body swap, but let's imagine that there's some person A, who's pictured here with the brain at time 1, and we take the brain and we split it in half. And we have two bodies that are identical to A, and we put one half of each brain in each body. So we have B at time 2 and C at time 2. So there's an operation. A's brain is split in half and put in B and C, and time 2, B and C wake up. Now, we might also think that just clones of A's brain are made and A's brain remains intact. So what should we say about this case, asks Parfit. Well, there's options. We can say A is neither B nor C. We can say A is B but not C, or likewise we can say A is C but not B. Finally, we can say A is both B and C. This captures all of the possibilities of like who we say is who after this surgery in the thought experiment. So what Parfit says about the first case is, how could a double success be a failure? So B and C wake up after the surgery and each says, I'm A, right? How is A neither B nor C when each of them attest to it and it looks like they all have the same memories and the same cares and concerns and desires and psychological continuity? But likewise, if we're to say that A is B but not C or the other way around, this seems arbitrary. Again, they both wake up with all the same memories and psychological continuity. What's to say that they are actually any different from one another? And finally, to say A is both B and C is to undermine the conception of identity, right? Where identity is a one-to-one relation. X equals Y. And if we say that A is both B and C, we're saying that X is Y and Z, and Y and Z are different things. It doesn't hold. So there's a peculiarity going on. There are other possibilities, of course. We might think that A is one person with a mind now divided. So you might think that B and C are only half of A, if identity can be split as such. So you might as well think that there are always two persons inside of A, that A was just two people existing in one half of a brain each and just trying to figure it out together until, thank goodness, they were given a bit of elbow room by the mad scientist who split their brain up and put it in two different bodies. And now the two people that had to coexist in A can exist independently in B and C. But again, both of these options seem implausible and forced by our commitment to identity, right? That in as much as we're committed to saying there is such a thing as identity, we're committed to biting the bullet somewhere, right? To biting the bullet in saying that either B or C but not both is A, or A is divided, or the A had two minds before the surgery, right? There's strange options. And these options are strange because we think common sense-wise that there needs to be such a thing as identity. Parfit alternatively says, look, it isn't clear what we should say about these cases. And if we must answer the question of identity to say something important about what we care about ourselves, then these unclear cases leave us in a whole lot of trouble. But Parfit is going to suggest that we don't need to say something about personal identity as like some kind of singular entity that we have or we don't, in order to capture what's important to us in the common sense about our identity. Like, I care about myself, you care about yourself, we care about each other. And what matters for this care and this concern is not some metaphysical, esoteric, hard to find, hard to capture sense of identity, but rather something else. So we'll come back to this. Now, we should hear this and think that there's a similarity to Hume, which is that Hume says our experience reveals resemblance and causal relations between perceptions and then transition between perceptions as coherent and smooth. So we might be mistaken into thinking there's a conception of a self. But recall as well that Hume says we don't have a good justification for it. And Parfit, because of these fission cases and brain swap cases and other similar kinds of cases, is going to agree with Hume that we can't nail down what's important about identity. By our very nature, we imagine that there must be some kind of thing. And where Hume says, look, we don't have evidence for it, but we assume that there is, Parfit's going to take a different tack. He's going to go a different direction. Parfit's not going to say we assume that there is a thing such as self. Parfit's going to say we're mistaking what we care about when we talk about the self. The self is a mistake in reasoning. And even Hume is wrong in thinking or in supposing that there's like an application of the I in our everyday experience. Rather, according to Parfit, what there's an application of is the self that we care about, our existential orientation and connection to community and to ourselves, to our memory, to our lived history and narrative. So Parfit says stop worrying about identity and start caring about survival. What matters to us is not some abstract criterion for the self or the ephemeral and unexplainable soul that lives in us. Any thought experiment can change your intuition about what counts as the criteria for the self. And any strong deductive reasoning, a la Hume, will hard press you to find a self at all. But we still care about the question. Even in these weird fission cases and brain swap cases, we're still committed to the conception of self, or at least to having some I that we can index to our experiences and to say, like, this is the sort of thing that I care about and that others care about and my community cares about and I care about in people. So what does Parfit mean by survival? Here's the diagram from the paper that we read for this lecture. So you might think there's a person A at time 1, and as time goes on, let's say they're cloned so many times. However many B's there are, that's how many times A is cloned. And all of these clones go on to live different lives, though with the body and the experience and the memories of A. And say some of them die off and some of them live happy, long lives. What Parfit wants to suggest with the conception of survival as more important than that of identity is that the A doesn't matter. If A's brain and body are destroyed or lost or put in some other person's body or fissioned in half or duplicated or cloned, whatever. What matters is that what matters to A lives on, and that the things that matter about A continue to matter to the people who care about those things as well, about A as well. So whether we're cloned or whether we're split, as long as what matters to us, what's important to us, what we care about goes on, it doesn't matter how it does, says Parfit. What matters is survival. So what we need is not this brain and this body or even this particular moment of psychological continuity. What we need is an overall holistic survival of the self vis-a-vis like what we care about. So what's new with this view? Well, when we body swap or are teleported through space, when we trade brains with a parrot, a la Luck, when we're reconstituted atom by atom with some other person, the self remains a jumbled mess. It's hard to pick out identity. In fact, it might even be impossible, according to Hume. But what lives on through these different cases is what we care about, right? Remember from the Williams, the torture case, or the winning $100,000 case, this is a sense of like desire transferring, and what you want to happen happens, or what you didn't want to happen happens. There's a sense of like connection to what occurs to us, body, brain, wherever it is. I care about the person who ends up on Mars and they give it a damn about me. Right, so if I get in a teleporter and my atoms are copied and then my body is vaporized and then those atoms are reconstituted on Mars, my body may be gone and there might be a brief moment, a split second in which I'm actually dead. But then I re-exist, I'm recombobulated on Mars, and I continue to live the life of the me with all of my cares and concerns and loves and sufferings and wants and desires, right? That continues on. So as long as something of me continues on, we have the same hopes and desires and fears. It doesn't matter how those live on, just so long as they do. And what captures what we care about in personal identity, according to Parfit, is not that metaphysical I, but the survival of what we care about. Survival of the self means survival of what's important to the self, however that might live on.